Hello, this is Digital Accessibility, the people behind the progress. I'm Joe Walensky, the creator and host of this series. And as an accessibility professional myself, I find it very interesting as to how others have found their way into this profession. So let's meet one of those people right now and hear about their journey. All right, well, here we are, and I have another opportunity to talk with an accessibility practitioner. Today, I am visiting with Ryan Shugart. Hello, Ryan. How are you today?
Hi, Joe. I'm doing great. It's great to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Well, I am in my home office on Vashon Island, which is near Blink's Seattle headquarters. Where are you talking to us from?
I am talking to you from just outside of Mill Creek, just a little ways, I think, northeast of you.
Well, it's good to have this opportunity to chat. I had an opportunity to meet you in the past at a local physical meetup event, I believe. But for those who are meeting you for the first time, why don't you talk a little bit about your activities, the types of things that you're involved with today?
Sure, absolutely. So I have been at Microsoft now for about 6.5 years. Joined back in 2016. And I work as a subject matter expert for accessibility on the cloud and AI accessibility team. And I like to describe to people our team is handling accessibility for anything at Microsoft that is not Windows, Office, and Xbox. Even though that's not even 100% accurate, there's definitely some overlap. But I help teams sit down and understand what does it mean when they get an accessibility bug? What is the impact of the bug? How can they fix it? And what is the impact of that fix going to be to the overall user experiences? Because different fixes can mean different side effects depending on the experience overall. So that's what I've been doing for the past 6 years. I have a couple other people that I work with on my team, and we work with, I'd say, about roughly give or take 1,000 different products.
Well, yeah, I'm always interested in how that practice works, especially when it has to scale for large organizations like that. So, yeah, I mean, you mentioned a lot of products. Is your team more or less on call when there's a new product or something, or are you kind of keeping track of developments? Like, how does it work on a kind of a day-to-day weekly basis for you to get involved with your colleagues?
It's kind of all of the above, honestly. We try to keep as close a track as we can when new products are being released and what the current state of the product is. Unfortunately, Microsoft is a big organization, and things occasionally slip even past us. It's rare, but let's be honest, it happens sometimes. So sometimes we have to just be watching some of the same sources you do just to make sure that we're on top of things. But I would say 9 times out of 10, products are really good at coming to us and saying, "Hey, we are about to make a new release, and here is the possible accessibility implications. Can you take a look at this and advise us?" And we have several programs that we run targeting specifically that. We are really big on shifting left with accessibility, and so we have a couple people who just work with designers on making sure that there is good design in the product to begin with, just to avoid accessibility bugs when it comes down to the testing stage. So yeah, we're not perfect. We can't be perfect, but I actually think we do a very good job.
Well, getting in at the design level is certainly a very progressive way to address that. You've been involved in a lot of activities in your career already, but I always like to find out kind of how it started with people with their live life and work life to start being aware of accessibility and deciding how it became part of their professional life. So kind of what was it with you where this was something that you became aware of and then started working with?
So I've been aware of it one way or another since I was young. I'm visually impaired. I was born visually impaired. So I've been using assistive technology ever since I started working with computers. I've had to. My first computer was an old Apple IIe back in 1988. Um, it had a Echo 2 card in it, and for those who may recognize it, used the Text Talker screen reader back then, even though I don't think the term screen reader had been invented yet. So obviously, this has been a need and something I've needed to do for a long time. I've always had a big interest in technology. I felt technology has a lot of potential to impact people's lives. And so I went to school and studied computing and actually graduated and went into IT for, I'd say, a good 12 years before I came to Microsoft. I was working as a system administrator, implementing IT systems in both small and large corporations. And as a blind person, there were a lot of challenges doing that. I was able to do my job very successfully, but it felt many times like half of my job was just figuring out how to do my job because I was working with a lot of inaccessible technologies from a lot of different vendors, including at the time Microsoft. And so I started raising issues and complaining and making the issues known to various companies, Microsoft included. And actually, at one point, someone from Microsoft came out and visited my workplace and saw once and for all some of the struggles that I was going through on a day to day basis. And that kind of led to me actually getting a job at Microsoft in the new, at the time it was new and it was called Cloud and Enterprise at the time, but the accessibility team was forming at that point. And so that's really how I got involved. I was living in Denver, Colorado at the time, and packed up, and we moved out to Seattle and started my Microsoft journey.
Well, thanks for sharing that background on your own personal challenges and your serendipitous connection with Microsoft. I think is many of us didn't come into our careers thinking that accessibility would be the part that we were involved with. So we've all come in different ways. So that's great to hear that you're able to make that connection and you're still involved in that same work. So it sounds like there's been a lot of it's obviously been worked out well for you, but maybe talk a little bit about kind of the different things that you worked on, or maybe give us an idea of like the evolution of accessibility in just within the organization and the products just in the time that you've been involved?
Well, there's definitely been a lot of work that's happened in the years that I've been involved, and our team has grown. When I started at Microsoft, it was a team of two people, me and my manager, and now there's 6 or 7 of us on the team. I would say that back when I joined Microsoft, accessibility as a whole in the company was really ramping up. I mean, it's always been something that has been topmost on Microsoft's minds, but especially when I joined back in the mid 2010s, it was really kicking off. I forget when Jenny Lafleury became the chief accessibility officer, but I think I joined relatively soon, maybe a year 2 after she did, but don't quote me on that. I don't remember the exact date she joined. Um, but point is that the program was just getting built up, and especially where I work. See, a lot of people when they think of Microsoft, they think of Windows, they think of Office, they think of Xbox, and all of those programs had relatively well off accessibility programs. But Cloud and Enterprise, as it was known at the time, didn't have much. We were still kind of the baby. So I was really involved from the program from the beginning, picking it up, um, pushing it through, and really evangelizing it to the other products, talking to the various product teams, explaining to them why accessibility is important, and what they need to do and what they can be doing to start making accessibility part of the process. And I think over the past 6 years, that has gotten a lot easier. We still have to have those kinds of conversations every now and then. And, I think you always will to a certain extent because there's always new people joining the team, new products starting off, and things like that. But really, as a whole, I feel like the organization has matured a lot since when I joined.
And you mentioned informing product managers about accessibility within the cloud area, but for that particular area of products that you work with in Microsoft, are there any things that are like uniquely different challenges that maybe you think are different from the more consumer facing products that you mentioned, like Windows and Office and Xbox?
That's a very interesting question. And I would say at the heart of it, it's the same stuff, different day. But there are some unique things that we have to deal with. To start with, the applications that we work with as a whole are a lot more complicated than your average web page. And we have to enable some user scenarios that maybe are a little bit beyond what Office and Windows have to deal with. So sometimes we have to think a little bit more outside of the box, think through how are we going to enable or what is a good design for the specific UI paradigm that we want to work through and enable. A good example is some of the things that Visual Studio is doing to make things like IntelliSense and the like accessible, or some of the things that we're doing on the Azure portal to enable a good experience there. The other, I would say, challenge we run into is that there just aren't as many people with disabilities as I would like using these tools. And there's a lot of reasons. Um, some of them are very complicated, and we can get into more of that. But that makes it a lot more of a challenge for us to get feedback. There's a ton of people ready to provide feedback on Word or Outlook or Excel or even the Windows desktop or something like that. But for something like, say, Azure Data Explorer or even the Azure portal or things like that, those are experiences that people need to be specifically trained on how to use. Anyone, disabled or non, would need to consume some kind of training, either from a book or a training course or something. Again, and I will even count to self exploration on that, but you have to have a certain knowledge to be able to play with those kind of tools that a average person on the street would not necessarily have if they're a Word user or something like that. So finding some good feedback channels can be a little bit more challenging.
Well, yeah, I think, part of it is that there are certain areas of technology where because accessibility isn't there, it isn't even something that people may think is an option for them to pursue as a career to pursue academically, or to try and get jobs in that area. And so I guess there's that situation, catch 22, where if there's the infrastructure isn't there, then you can't get involved in it. But if people don't get involved in it, then it can't be improved. So do you have any thoughts, just like generally, on the ability to build out the opportunities so that there are more people uh, with disabilities that are involved in using the type of services that you're involved with?
That's a very good question, and that's a complicated answer because there is a lot of reasons that there is an employment gap in the community in general, let alone in tech. And it's not something that can be easily solved. Um, that said, inaccessible technology is a big part of that. And I think, honestly, the area I'd like to see a lot more focus on is training. Getting some good, accessible training out there to train people with disabilities on how to use these things, how to even get them interested, show them what this can do, and show them that it is accessible. I mean, I do use Azure. I do use um, all of these tools. Some of them more successfully than others, but I'll focus on Azure because it's one I use almost every day. I get through that portal. It is a clunky experience, and there's still a lot to be done to improve on it, and we're working on it. But you can do it. You can get through. You can create virtual machines. You can create app services. All of these new things that are coming in, it's doable today. It is not, the most usable experience out there, but people can get in there and do that. And so a lot of it is just a lack of understanding of how to do it because it is a little weird and it is a little unusual. And some of that's just for anybody, not even just people using assistive technology or people with a disability. It's a learning curve for anyone. And then you add accessibility to that learning curve, and it makes it really hard. So if there's anything we can do to flatten that learning curve out, I would say it's worth it to try.
Well, so you've already been involved in the IT area for a really long time. You've got some perspective on kind of how things were, how they've changed. Looking forward to the future, are there any areas where you think our profession should spend more time, addressing, thinking about? Are there new activities that you're excited about that you're going to get involved with? Just generally, any thoughts you have about, kind of where you see our profession or your own work going in the future?
I think that there is a huge potential for artificial intelligence to assist with accessibility. I don't think it's there yet, but I think we're at the beginning of that journey. I'm sure you've tried ChatGPT out there, and right now its leaves a lot to be desired, but it's still impressive what it's able to do even today. And if you think about things in the next 5 to 10 years, there's just a lot of potential for how a properly trained, and I want to really emphasize properly trained. That's the key. That's the differentiator here, and I think that's what's so hard. But a properly trained AI can do. I mean, we already have products at Microsoft like Seeing AI that are already helping disabled people with by using artificial intelligence a lot today, and I think that that's going to grow, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for it to grow. Another thing that's happening is we have Copilot, which is a tool introduced by GitHub that Visual Studio is adopting that can help people write code. And again, all of these things are still in there. There's a long way to go. I don't want to give anyone the impression these things are ready today. They're not. But 5, 10 years down the road, I think these things will make a huge difference. Um, I also see an interesting shift, and I don't even know exactly where it's heading yet, but I see it in the place of assistive technology like screen readers. It's a thing that comes up a lot for us is what is the responsibility of the screen reader slash assistive technology to do, and what is the responsibility of the application itself to do as far as contributing to accessibility? Should, for example, underlying applications force screen readers to read out messages? What kinds of messages? Or should they just make certain things programmatically available and then let the screen reader choose how to read them? I I see that all the time. I certainly have my own opinions on it, but it's definitely, I think, something that I see more and more of going on right now, and is something that I think we're going to have to address at some point in the relatively near future. One final thing I'll mention is right now, a lot of accessibility around the world is focused a lot on being compliant with the various accessibility regulations. Section 508, European regulation, WCAG, whatever it is. I think we're going to be moving to a lot more focus on usability over the next 5 to 10 years, because those regulations only go so far. And I think a lot of people don't realize how minimum bar WCAG actually is. I'll be honest, I didn't realize how minimum bar WCAG actually was until I actually started looking at it, talking to people who really knew it, and started thinking about what does this actually mean. And there are certain cases when you sit back and think about it, like color contrast, for example, or even things like page layout when it's talking about headings. That WCAG, if you make it, you can make a page that is absolutely WCAG compliant, but is so unusable it's not even funny. And when you expand that to more complicated applications, that just becomes oh so more apparent. So I really would like to see, and I think I see it, a shift away from just making sure that your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed, to a place where people are actually trying to make their products accessible, usable, and something that is a delight for people to use across the board.
I guess when you get into that part with compliance, then if an organization wants to go by beyond compliance, then of course return on investment and other values about your organization are what ends up fostering that push. As a person that uses assistive devices yourself, but are there any kind of thoughts you have to organizations about the value of what they do beyond just trying to avoid a legal lawsuit?
Yeah, disabled people are customers, and you should want as good of an experience for them as you would want for any other customer. We're not just people who could sue you. In fact, most of us don't really want to do that, at least speaking for myself. But we want to use your product. We want to give you money. So it's in your best interest to have as usable of an experience for us that you can, just like anybody else. And I'm sure you've heard this a number of times, Joe. Our population isn't getting any younger. We're aging. People are developing new disabilities. All of these things happen all the time. You never know when someone may become disabled. Maybe you'll break an arm. Maybe something more serious will happen. And you may find yourself one day needing to use the technology. And at that point, you'll want as good of an experience as you can have using it. So think of people with disabilities as people who use your products, who happen to need to access them a little different.
Well, you've given us quite a lot of great ideas, thoughts about the future. I really appreciate that, and so yeah, it's been a real pleasure having this opportunity to chat with you and find out a little bit about your background. And one of the other questions I had is, do you have the opportunity to get involved in any of the community activities or conferences? I know the pandemic slowed things down a little bit, but is that something that you've been involved in?
Absolutely. I've been to CSUN several times, and we've attended several conferences virtually, both as Microsoft and just on my own. And I'm hoping as things reopen that I can get back out there and meet more people again, because it was certainly a lot of fun and very informative just meeting people before.
All right, well, great. Well, maybe I'll meet you at one of those activities. So thank you again for participating in this.
Thank you, Joe.